Hello guys, it's Mr. Cole, continuing on in our series over the Enlightenment and our Declaration of Independence. Our objective today is to describe how the Declaration of Independence reflects the ideas of natural rights and the social contract. Now, if you're not sure what those terms mean, you need to go back and watch the video also in this module because I went over what those were. Not going to do that as much in detail. Today's more the practicing of those terms. So let's go ahead and get started. So where we pick off in American history, it is 1775, and American colonists are not really happy. For over almost 200 years, the colonies had been under British rule. These were all British citizens who were upset about the way that the last 20 to 30 years had been going, and so they chose to begin rebelling. Now, they had a number of grievances. This word grievance means complaints. The American colonists had a number of complaints against the British government, especially King George III. They argued the king was a tyrant for the following reasons. Number one, not having a trial by jury. This was in violation of even English documents at the time, that a trial by jury rights were not being respected. Probably the biggest one, the one that we famously know of, is the high taxation on the colonists. Now, this was to pay for the French and Indian War, which was a very expensive war that the British fought against the French in the colonies. But really, the colonist issue was not only the taxation, but the fact that they were not giving their consent to the taxation. Britain has a government called Parliament. Parliament is their legislative branch. They make the laws. The frustrating thing for the colonists was that the 13 American colonies did not have a representative in Parliament. So as Parliament were voting on these taxes, the American colonists did not have any vote and were just being forced to pay with them without their vote. This became known as the famous phrase, taxation without representation, which kind of became the rallying cry against the British. Along with this, though, they felt like their natural rights were being violated in other ways. The king kept standing armies in the colonies during times of peace. Now, you might think that's like, oh yeah, they had an army, okay. But I want you to consider this. Imagine you're going out the street, you're going to go get Uncle Mike's at lunchtime, and you walk out and you see on the street corner a U.S. Army soldier in full battle gear with their assault rifle standing on the corner just watching you. And then down the street goes a tank. And in the sky you see the fighter jets and military helicopters flying. Right? You would feel a little bit threatened, especially if you didn't agree with their policies they were making. And the colonists felt like having this army was a huge violation of their rights. It got even worse when the king signed the Quartering Act, which basically said the colonists were forced to house soldiers, and basically the soldiers could come into your house without a warrant for any reason, and you had to let them in, and you had to let them stay there too if they want to stay overnight. So just huge, gross violations of rights that eventually built up so much. So in 1775, in Massachusetts, we see the first beginnings of the American Revolution in skirmishes at Lexington and Concord, then more of an official battle at Bunker Hill, and the Revolutionary War had begun. That being said, it was not a full-on war yet because it was only taking place in Massachusetts. Eventually, the colonists begin to meet and discuss declaring their independence from Great Britain, and when they do, they will use the Enlightenment and the ideas of the natural rights and social contract as their reason for it. So they meet in Philadelphia, and on July 2nd, 1776, they vote to declare independence, and they assign Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams to draft the reasons why. Thomas Jefferson will take the lead in writing what we know as the Declaration of Independence. It explains our reasoning behind the rebellion. So here are the big things they'll talk about. He talks about the following ideals: natural rights, social contract, and the idea of equality. So I'm going to give you the first little paragraph here and show you how these ideas are reflected in Jefferson's language. So he starts it off with kind of the American creed, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. This term self-evident means like obvious, right? It's not something that you have to be told. It's something that we just find to be true. There's no questioning it. Now, please keep in mind as you read that as Thomas Jefferson wrote this, he owned slaves. So Thomas Jefferson's he is very hypocritical when he says all men are created equal. Yet he owns slaves, shows some of that internal divisions of America that already are taking place. But this concept, this idea that all men are created equal, is the founding idea of our country. From there, he goes on to explain natural rights. So we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Endowed means given, so they are given by their Creator certain rights that are unalienable. They cannot be taken away. You cannot distinguish them from someone else's. Everybody has them. And they are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, there's quite a debate over why Jefferson specifically wrote pursuit of happiness and not property, but that was the language that he chose. So we have all men are created equal, and they have natural rights that cannot be taken away. Now he builds into the social contract that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So in order to protect these rights, governments are created in order for this to do, right? Again, building off John Locke, the government exists for the protection of rights. And he continues on. Deriving their powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government. He says that government's created to protect our rights, and that they get their power from the consent of the governed, from the permission of those they are governing, from us, the people. And that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of this, when they stop protecting our rights or just start destroying our rights, it is our right of the people to alter or abolish it, to change it or to get rid of it, and to institute a new government. And that is ultimately what he justifies this rebellion as. This rebellion is happening because the British government has not protected our rights. We no longer give them consent to rule us, and we want to start a new government that will protect these rights. And that is the founding of our country. It is in this paragraph, there's the actual declaration. It is in that paragraph that Jefferson outlines the most basic principle in American government, that we are all created equal, that we all have natural rights, and that we establish the government to protect those rights. And with that, officially on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence was presented, and with that, the American colonies declare themselves independent of British rule, and now the war has really, really, really begun. Alrighty, guys, that's where we'll leave off today. We'll continue on with our founding documents in the next videos. See you guys.